For as long as anyone in my village could remember, fear lived with us like an unwanted neighbor. Every morning, we prayed that our crops would still be standing. Every night, we locked our doors and listened to the sounds drifting from the dark forest beyond our fields. The trees stood tall and silent during the day, but when the sun disappeared, strange cries echoed through the night. No one dared to go near them after sunset. Our village had once been known for rich harvests, healthy cattle, and joyful festivals. But those days felt like stories from another lifetime. Season after season, our crops were trampled without reason. Fields that had taken months to grow were destroyed in a single night. Goats, sheep, and cows vanished from their pens, leaving behind only broken fences and deep claw marks pressed into the earth. The greatest pain was not the lost harvests or the missing animals. It was the people who never came home. Hunters disappeared while tracking game. Farmers vanished on their way back from distant fields. Even children who wandered too close to the forest were never seen again. The elders believed an ancient curse had awakened deep inside the woods. No one questioned them. After so many tragedies, it became easier to believe in curses than to search for answers. I was one of the village hunters. My name was Kofi, and though many called me brave, I never felt fearless. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was choosing to protect others even when your heart begged you to run. My father had taught me that before he disappeared in the forest 8 years earlier. Since then, I had hunted not only for food but also for hope. Every journey into the forest was another chance to discover what had stolen so much from us. Despite everything, our people never stopped caring for one another. Neighbors shared food when crops failed. Women gathered to comfort grieving mothers. Children still found reasons to laugh, even if their laughter faded whenever the wind carried strange sounds from the trees. Then, one bright morning, everything changed. Before sunrise, 3 village scouts rushed through the gates, shouting with excitement, "The beast is dead!" People poured from their homes. The chief gathered everyone in the center of the village as the exhausted scouts told their story. Deep inside the forest, they had discovered the enormous body of a terrifying creature lying motionless beneath broken trees. Its massive claws were stained with old blood, and fresh wounds covered its body. "The monster that cursed our village is gone," one scout declared proudly. Cheers exploded across the village. Some people cried. Others fell to their knees, thanking God for finally answering years of desperate prayers. Within hours, the village transformed. Drums echoed across the open fields. Women prepared large pots of food that had been saved for special occasions. Children danced without fear for the first time in years. Old men sang songs they had not sung since their youth. Families embraced each other with tears of relief. The chief announced that the curse had finally ended. As the celebration grew louder, I slipped away toward the edge of the forest. Something inside me refused to celebrate. The dead creature certainly looked dangerous, but something felt wrong. Near the place where the scouts claimed victory, I knelt beside the soft ground. Fresh footprints. They were larger than the ones left by the dead beast. I frowned. A few steps farther, several giant trees had been snapped in half. Not fallen. Broken. As if something far stronger had forced its way through them only hours earlier. I slowly stood, scanning the silent forest. That was when I noticed the strangest thing of all. No birds. No insects. No monkeys swinging through the branches. The forest was completely silent. I had hunted these woods since I was a boy. I had never heard silence like this. A cold chill crept down my back. Behind me, I could still hear the joyful music and laughter rising from the village. But in front of me, the forest felt as though it was holding its breath. And deep in my heart, I knew our celebration had come far too soon. The real danger had only just begun. The days that followed felt like a dream. For the first time in many years, the people of our village woke without fear in their eyes. Farmers carried their tools back to fields that had stood empty for months. They laughed as they planted fresh seeds, believing no monster would come to destroy their hard work again. Children raced through the dusty paths, chasing each other with wide smiles. Their mothers no longer called them inside before sunset. The sound of laughter filled every corner of the village. Traders returned from neighboring villages with carts full of cloth, grain, and salt. Roads that had once been silent became busy again. Even strangers stopped to congratulate us on surviving what they believed had been the end of our curse. The elders gathered beneath the old baobab tree and declared a new beginning. "The darkness has passed," the village chief announced proudly. Our children will never know the fear that haunted us." The crowd clapped with joy. Everyone wanted to believe him. Everyone except me. Each morning before sunrise, I returned to the edge of the forest. Something inside me refused to rest. The strange footprints I had seen after the celebration had not disappeared. Instead, there were more. I followed them carefully through the damp ground until they vanished beneath thick bushes. Then I noticed something that made my heart pound. Fresh claw marks covered the trunks of several giant trees. I placed my hand against one of them. The marks were far above my head. Even the beast the scouts had found could never have reached that high. Whatever made these scratches was much taller, much stronger. I looked toward the treetops. The branches swayed gently in the morning breeze, but no birds sang. That silence had grown even heavier. The colorful birds that usually filled the forest had completely disappeared. Even the monkeys were gone. It was as if every living creature had fled from something unseen. I walked to the nearby river where hunters often stopped for water. The river had always been alive with frogs, fish, and insects. Now, nothing. The water flowed quietly without a single ripple. No fish jumped. No dragonflies hovered above the surface. The forest felt empty. Not peaceful. Waiting. Later that afternoon, I met several hunters returning from deeper inside the woods. Their faces were pale. Their clothes were torn by branches. One of them noticed me watching. For a brief moment, fear flashed across his face. "What did you see?" I asked. No one answered. They lowered their heads and continued walking. Another hunter whispered, "Forget the forest." Then they disappeared into the village without another word. That silence frightened me more than any answer could have. I brought my concerns before the village chief during the evening meeting. "There are fresh tracks," I said. "Something is still moving through the forest. The claw marks are larger than before." The chief sighed impatiently. "Kofi," he replied, "must you always search for shadows?" "I've seen them myself." "You've seen fear," he answered. "Nothing more." Some villagers nodded in agreement. Others began whispering, "He cannot accept good news. He wants everyone afraid again. He is ruining our peace." Each word felt heavier than the last. Even my closest friends looked uncertain. Kwame, who had hunted beside me for years, placed a hand on my shoulder. "Brother," he said quietly, "perhaps you're letting the past control your eyes." His words hurt more than I expected. If even he doubted me, who would listen? As the meeting ended, an old woman slowly approached me. Her back was bent with age, and her walking stick tapped softly against the ground. Everyone called her grandmother Abina. She had lived longer than anyone in the village. Without speaking, she looked toward the dark forest. Then she whispered words that sent a chill through my body. "The first monster is never the last." I turned to ask what she meant, but she simply walked away. That night, long after the village had fallen asleep, I stood outside my home staring at the forest. The moon hung low above the trees. For several moments, everything was silent. Then, a deep, terrible roar echoed from somewhere far inside the darkness. It was followed by another, and another. None of them sounded like the beast we believed was dead. The celebration was over. Something far worse had awakened. The terrifying roars that echoed through the forest that night stole the peace from my heart. By morning, the rest of the village tried to pretend they had imagined the sounds. They were only lions. It was thunder. The wind carried strange echoes. Everyone searched for an explanation that allowed them to keep believing the nightmare was over. I wished they were right. But before the sun reached the middle of the sky, fear returned to our village. A young boy came running from the northern edge of the settlement, his face covered in tears. "They're gone," he cried. "The Mensa family is gone." People rushed toward the family's small home near the forest. I was among the first to arrive. The sight before me made my blood run cold. The hut had been smashed apart as if struck by the hands of a giant. Thick wooden poles had snapped like dry sticks. The roof had collapsed, and everything inside was scattered across the ground. Cooking pots lay crushed. Blankets were torn apart. Children's toys were buried beneath broken pieces of wood. But the family, they were nowhere. No bodies. No blood. No footprints leading away. It was as if they had simply vanished into the morning mist. The villagers searched until sunset, calling each family member by name. No one answered. Fear spread quietly through every home. Still, the village chief refused to believe another monster had returned. It was bandits, he insisted during the evening meeting. They kidnapped the family. Many people nodded. Bandits sounded less frightening than another curse. People always choose the lie that hurts less. For 2 days, the village forced itself to continue working. But no one laughed anymore. Children stayed close to their parents. Doors closed before sunset. The celebration already felt like a distant memory. Then the second attack came. This time, it happened in the western grazing fields. Nearly 20 goats and several cows were found lying across the grass. Every animal had been killed. Not one had been taken. Not one had been eaten. Their bodies were left exactly where they had fallen. I knelt beside one of the cattle and studied the wounds. The cuts were clean, powerful, almost deliberate. This was not hunger. This was a warning. The beast we believed we had killed always hunted for food. Whatever had done this wanted us to be afraid. That single thought chilled me more than the morning wind. I began collecting every clue I could find. The footprints surrounding the field were unlike anything I had ever seen. Each print was nearly twice the size of those left by the dead creature. The claws dug much deeper into the earth, showing incredible weight. Even stranger, there wasn't just one trail. There were several. Some overlapped. Others circled the field before disappearing into the forest. Whatever hunted now moved with purpose. It watched. It planned. It understood. I brought my findings before the hunters. This time, they listened. Not because they believed me. Because they had started seeing the signs themselves. The next morning, 6 of us entered the forest together. No one spoke much. Even the birds remained silent. The deeper we walked, the darker the trees became. Sunlight barely reached the ground beneath the thick branches. Hours passed before one hunter suddenly raised his hand. We stopped. There, pressed into the soft earth before us, was the largest footprint I had ever seen. It was longer than my arm. Fresh. Its edges had not yet begun to crumble. It passed here today, one hunter whispered. No one argued. We continued following the trail until the forest opened into a place none of us had ever seen before. Massive stone walls rose from beneath tangled vines. Ancient ruins. Trees had grown through cracked buildings, as though nature had spent centuries trying to hide them. Strange symbols covered the broken stones. Some looked like giant eyes. Others resembled claws surrounding a circle. Grandmother Abina's words echoed inside my mind. The first monster is never the last. Near the center of the ruins lay something that made my heart stop. The skeleton of another massive beast. Its bones were larger than the creature we had celebrated killing. Iron chains, now rusted with age, still wrapped around its ribs. Nearby stood a broken stone pillar covered in carvings. Although time had worn away much of the writing, one image remained clear. A giant creature stood before a dark shape rising from beneath the earth. It was not attacking it. It was holding it back. The truth struck me like lightning. The beast we had celebrated killing had never been the true enemy. It had been guarding something far worse. Before anyone could speak, every hunter suddenly froze. The forest had become completely silent again. Then, a branch snapped somewhere behind us. Slowly, another snapped to our left. Then another. The sounds were circling us. I tightened my grip on my spear as every hunter turned in a different direction. We could not see anything between the towering trees, but we all felt the same terrifying truth. We were no longer the hunters. Something hidden in the darkness was hunting us. For several long seconds, none of us moved. The snapping branches continued around us, slow and steady, as though invisible feet were circling our group. I tightened my grip on my spear. Every hunter stood back to back, staring into the darkness between the trees. Then I saw them. 2 glowing yellow eyes. They appeared for only a heartbeat before disappearing behind a thick tree. Another pair appeared farther away. Then another. Whatever surrounded us was moving together. Not like wild animals. Like hunters working as one. "Don't run," I whispered. But fear had already taken hold. One of the younger hunters suddenly shouted and sprinted toward the path we had followed into the ruins. The moment he ran, the forest exploded with terrifying sounds. A deafening roar shook the trees. Branches snapped. Leaves flew into the air. Something enormous crashed through the undergrowth behind us. "Run!" someone screamed. We no longer cared about pride or courage. We ran for our lives. I never saw the creature clearly. Only flashes of dark movement between the trees. Massive shadows. Towering shapes that seemed almost part of the forest itself. Every few moments, another roar echoed behind us, pushing us faster. One hunter stumbled over a fallen log. I grabbed his arm and pulled him to his feet before we both kept running. By the time we reached the edge of the forest, every one of us was exhausted. None of us spoke. We didn't need to. The fear on our faces said everything. That evening, I went searching for the one person who might know the truth. Grandmother Abina. She lived alone in the oldest hut in the village, surrounded by dried herbs and carved wooden figures passed down through generations. When I entered, she looked at me as if she had been expecting my visit. "You found the ruins," she said quietly. I nodded. "And the carvings?" Again, I nodded. She closed her eyes for a long moment before speaking. "Our ancestors buried the truth because they believed it should never be spoken again." She slowly reached for a small wooden box resting beside her bed. Inside was a faded animal skin covered with ancient drawings. She carefully spread it across the table. The pictures told a story older than the village itself. Long before our people settled here, something terrible rose from beneath the mountain. It was not simply a beast. It was a force that brought fear, hatred, and destruction wherever it walked. Many villagers disappeared trying to fight it. Finally, our ancestors joined together with wise healers and powerful hunters. Instead of killing the creature, they trapped it beneath the mountain using ancient rituals. But the prison needed a guardian. A powerful forest beast was chosen to stand watch over the prison forever. Generation after generation, it kept the ancient evil locked away. "The guardian was never our enemy," Grandmother Abina whispered. "It frightened people away from the mountain because it was protecting all of us." A painful silence filled the room. My chest felt heavy. Images of the celebration flashed through my mind. The cheering, the dancing, the songs, the joy. We had celebrated the death of the very creature that had been saving our lives. I lowered my head. "I was part of the hunting party," I said quietly. "My spear struck it." Grandmother Abina gently placed her hand on mine. "You acted without knowing the truth." "But it changes nothing," I replied. "If we had listened, if I had stopped them." She shook her head. "Blaming yourself will not save the village now." The next morning, I gathered the village elders and shared everything I had learned. The meeting quickly turned into shouting. Some believed Grandmother Abina's story immediately. Others laughed. Old legends cannot explain what is happening. "You're trying to frighten everyone. The beast is dead. That's all." The village chief stood firmly against me. "We cannot govern our people with fairy tales." "But we've seen the ruins," I argued. "We saw the carvings." Ancient stones prove nothing. Soon the villagers divided into two groups. Families argued with one another. Neighbors stopped trusting neighbors. Some wanted to prepare defenses. Others insisted life should continue as normal. Every meeting ended with louder voices than the one before. Fear was accomplishing what no monster had managed to do. It was breaking the village apart from the inside. That evening, dark clouds gathered over the mountain. The air became strangely warm. Even the wind stopped blowing. Then, the ground trembled beneath my feet. At first, it was only a slight vibration. People paused in confusion. A second tremor followed. Stronger. Clay pots fell from shelves. Chickens scattered across the village. Children cried as houses creaked. Then the earth shook with terrifying force. The ground cracked in several places. Dust rose into the air. Far beyond the fields, deep inside the forest, a thunderous roar echoed across the valley. It sounded victorious, as though something imprisoned for centuries had finally broken its chains. And every person in the village knew, without speaking a single word, something ancient had awakened. After the earth shook beneath our feet, nothing in the village was ever the same again. It was as if the land itself had begun to die. Only a few days after the tremors, our green fields started turning brown. Healthy corn bent toward the ground as though its life had been stolen overnight. The leaves of our cassava plants curled into dry, brittle shells. Farmers stood helplessly in their fields, watching months of hard work disappear before their eyes. No one understood what was happening. Every sunrise revealed more dead crops. Every sunset brought fresh fear. Then the wells began to fail. The village's largest well, which had never run dry even during the hottest seasons, slowly sank lower each day. Women who once filled their buckets within minutes now waited for hours just to collect enough water for their families. Soon, there wasn't enough for everyone. Arguments broke out where laughter had once echoed. Neighbors who had shared meals together now fought over a single bucket of water. The forest grew stranger with each passing day. Animals fled in large numbers. Herds of antelope raced across the plains without stopping. Monkeys abandoned the trees. Even snakes crawled away from the mountain, as though they were escaping something far worse than hunger. Nature was warning us, but we were too busy fearing one another. Then sickness arrived. It began with a few children who developed high fevers and strange nightmares. Soon elderly villagers became too weak to stand. Strong men who had worked from sunrise until evening suddenly collapsed without warning. The village healer could find no cure. She mixed herbs. She offered prayers. She stayed awake through countless nights caring for the sick. Still, more people fell ill every day. As our food supplies grew smaller, kindness began disappearing. People who had always trusted each other suddenly became suspicious. Someone whispered that the Mensa family had brought the curse before they disappeared. Another person blamed families who had recently moved into the village. Soon, everyone was searching for someone else to blame. They angered the spirits. No, it was the hunters. The elders kept secrets from us. They should all be punished. The word spread faster than the sickness. One afternoon I found two brothers shouting at each other outside their father's home. They had never argued before. Now they were fighting over a sack of grain. Their old father sat nearby, weeping quietly because he could no longer recognize the sons he had raised. I stepped between them before they came to blows. This is exactly what the darkness wants, I told them. If we turn against each other, we've already lost. For a moment, both men lowered their heads. But as hunger grew, even good advice became difficult to hear. Some families decided they would leave the village altogether. If we can reach another town, they said, we can start over. A small group packed everything they owned onto wooden carts and set off before sunrise. By evening, they returned. Their faces were pale with terror. The roads are gone, one man whispered. Huge trees had fallen across every path leading out of the valley. Deep cracks split the earth. There was no way through. It felt as though something had trapped us inside. Our village had become a prison. The greatest disappointment came from some of our own leaders. Instead of helping the people, they began protecting themselves. The village chief ordered guards to watch his food stores while children went hungry. Other respected men quietly gathered supplies for their own families. The promises they had made to serve the people disappeared with the first signs of danger. I spent every day moving from house to house, encouraging neighbors to share what little they had left. Some listened. Many did not. One evening, a frightened young boy secretly approached me. "Kofi," he whispered, "I saw something." He led me to an old storage hut behind the home of Elder Bajou, one of the village's most trusted leaders. When we quietly opened the door, my heart sank. Inside were dozens of hidden sacks of grain, barrels of dried fish, jars of clean water, enough food to feed many families for weeks, while children cried from hunger. He had been hiding supplies for himself. The news spread through the village before sunrise. People gathered outside Elder Bajou's home, shouting with anger. Some demanded punishment. Others tried forcing their way inside. The crowd became dangerous. I stood before them with raised hands. "If we answer greed with violence," I shouted, "we will become no better than the evil hunting us." Just then, Grandmother Abina slowly stepped forward. The crowd grew quiet. Her voice was soft, but every person heard her. "When fear enters the heart," she said, "people stop seeing neighbors. They begin seeing enemies." She looked at every face gathered before her. "Remember this. Fear often destroys people long before monsters ever do." Silence filled the village. For one brief moment, it seemed her words had reached us. Then the sky suddenly darkened. Heavy clouds rolled over the mountain. Lightning flashed across the heavens. A powerful wind swept through the village, bending trees and tearing roofs from several homes. Rain poured down in sheets so thick that we could barely see across the square. Another bolt of lightning split the sky. For a single terrifying second, the entire forest lit up. And there, standing above the treetops near the mountain, was a creature unlike anything I had ever imagined. Its enormous body towered over the trees. 2 glowing eyes burned like fire through the storm. Long black horns curved toward the sky. Its roar shook the earth itself. No one spoke. No one moved. Every person in the village stared in frozen horror. The monster we had feared for years had never been the true nightmare. This was the ancient evil our ancestors had imprisoned. And now it had come to claim the village. The storm did not end after we saw the creature. It grew stronger. Thunder rolled across the sky without stopping. Lightning flashed again and again, turning night into day for only a heartbeat before darkness swallowed everything once more. Then the creature roared. The sound struck our village like a giant wave. Windows shattered. Clay pots crashed to the ground. Children covered their ears and cried. I felt the earth tremble beneath my feet as the monster took its first steps toward us. "Everyone, get inside," someone shouted. But it was already too late. The creature reached the edge of the village with terrifying speed. Its enormous body crashed through the outer fence as though it were made of dry grass. One swing of its massive arm sent wooden huts flying into the air. Flaming pieces of burning wood landed on nearby rooftops. Within minutes, fire spread through the village. Orange flames climbed into the stormy sky while thick black smoke covered everything around us. People screamed in every direction. "Mama! Help! Run!" The sounds of fear filled the night. Families became separated in the confusion. Parents searched desperately for their children. Children wandered through smoke, calling for mothers and fathers they could no longer find. I forced myself to stay calm. If panic took control of me, everyone around me would lose hope. I climbed onto a large rock in the center of the village. "Listen to me," I shouted with all my strength. Some people looked up. Others were too frightened to hear. "We cannot survive if everyone runs alone." My voice barely rose above the storm. "Gather at the old baobab tree. The strongest will protect the weakest." Slowly, people began moving toward the center of the village. The young men and women who had grown up beside me answered first. Without waiting for instructions, they rushed into the burning streets. One young hunter carried 2 frightened children from a collapsing house. Another group formed a line to help elderly villagers reach safety. Even teenagers who had never faced danger before refused to run away. Their courage gave others strength. I watched a mother wrap her own baby tightly against her chest before running into the smoke. For one terrible moment, I thought she had lost her mind. Then she emerged carrying another woman's little daughter in her free arm. She had risked everything to save a child who was not even her own. That single act changed something in the crowd. People stopped asking, "How do I save myself?" They started asking, "Who still needs help?" Former enemies reached out to each other. The 2 brothers who had nearly fought over grain only days earlier now carried injured villagers together. Neighbors who had refused to share food now shared water with complete strangers. Fear had divided us. Compassion was bringing us back together. But not everyone chose courage. As I searched the square, I saw the village chief climbing onto a horse loaded with sacks of food and water. Several guards surrounded him. "Where are you going?" I shouted. He avoided my eyes. "I must survive," he answered. "If I live, I can rebuild later." Then he rode away into the storm, leaving his people behind. No one tried to stop him. His title had meant nothing the moment he abandoned those who trusted him. Real leaders do not run first. They stay last. The battle grew worse with every passing minute. Several brave hunters stood together at the northern entrance of the village. They knew they could not defeat the monster. Their only goal was to slow it down. They threw burning spears. They beat drums to draw its attention away from fleeing families. One by one, they fell. Their sacrifice gave dozens of villagers enough time to escape the flames. Among them was Kwame, my oldest friend, the man who had once doubted my warnings. Before charging toward the creature, he looked back at me and smiled. "Protect them," he called. Then he disappeared into the smoke. Moments later, A terrible roar echoed through the night. I never saw him again. My knees nearly gave way beneath me. Grief hit me harder than any weapon. I wanted to run after him. I wanted to save him. But dozens of frightened children were standing behind me. I could not abandon them. As I watched the monster move through the village, something suddenly became clear. Whenever people scattered in panic, the creature seemed stronger. Its eyes burned brighter. Its movements became faster. But whenever villagers stood together to protect one another, it hesitated. Its roars grew weaker. The darkness surrounding its body flickered like a dying fire. Grandmother Abina's words returned to me. Fear often destroys people long before monsters ever do. She had been right all along. The creature did not feed only on flesh. It fed on fear, on hatred, on division. Every act of courage stole some of its strength. Every moment of unity weakened it. Hope returned to my heart for the first time since the nightmare had begun. We've been fighting the wrong battle, I told the survivors gathered beneath the baobab tree. We cannot defeat it by standing alone. We must become one village again. The people looked at one another. No one argued. No one blamed anyone else. At last, they understood. Hunters stood beside farmers. Mothers beside warriors. Elders beside children. Together, we began preparing one final plan. Not to escape, but to protect the home we loved. As dawn slowly approached, the storm eased just enough for us to see beyond the village. My heart sank. The hills surrounding us were no longer empty. Dark shapes stood among the trees in every direction. Dozens of glowing eyes stared back at us through the fading rain. The ancient evil had not come alone. Its followers had surrounded the village. There would be no escape. Only one final battle remained. As the first light of dawn touched the sky, our village stood in silence. Smoke still rose from the burned homes. The ground was covered with broken wood, scattered tools, and the memories of the people we had lost. Every face showed fear. But for the first time since this nightmare had begun, that fear no longer controlled us. I looked around at the survivors. We fight together, I said. No one stands alone. Every person nodded. Hunters lifted their spears. Farmers picked up axes and farming tools. Even the elderly stood with walking sticks in their hands. No one asked who was strongest. Everyone simply asked where they were needed. Grandmother Abina stepped forward. Her eyes rested on the ancient mountain. Our ancestors left us more than stories, she said. They left us a path. She led the elders to the oldest shrine in the village, a place that had been forgotten for generations. Hidden beneath broken stones, they uncovered an ancient firebowl carved with the same symbols we had seen in the forest ruins. The elders carefully cleaned away the dust. Then, using dry wood that had been protected inside the shrine, they lit a small sacred flame. It must never go out, Grandmother Abina whispered. It carries the hope of those who came before us. The children gathered around the fire. Although they were frightened, none of them stepped back. Each child carried a small torch lit from the sacred flame. Their tiny hands trembled, but their eyes were filled with courage. Around them, the hunters formed a protective circle. No monster would reach the children while we still stood. The women quickly organized the rest of the village. Some cared for the wounded. Others carried water to stop new fires from spreading. Several mothers comforted children who had lost their families, treating them as their own. The village no longer belonged to separate families. We had become one family. As the dark creatures slowly surrounded us, something incredible happened. No one blamed anyone anymore. The farmers stopped accusing the hunters. The hunters stopped blaming the elders. The elders admitted they should have shared the ancient legend sooner. Even I forgave myself for helping hunt the guardian. Regret could not change the past. Only our choices could shape what happened next. The ground began shaking once more. The ancient creature stepped into the open field before the village. Its massive body seemed even larger in the morning light. Its glowing eyes searched our faces. Perhaps it expected panic. Instead, it found unity. The creature roared with anger. Dark smoke rose around its body. The smaller shadow creatures charged toward us from every direction. Hold the line. I shouted. Hunters raised their shields. Farmers stood beside them. Every attack that reached us was met by dozens of hands working together. No one fought for themselves. Everyone fought for each other. With every act of courage, I noticed something remarkable. The darkness surrounding the great creature became thinner. Its movement slowed. Its furious roars lost some of their strength. Grandmother Abina had been right. The evil fed on fear. Without fear, it was starving. Suddenly, a familiar voice shouted behind us, "I have returned." The village chief rode back into the square. His horse was exhausted. His face was covered with shame. "I was a coward," he admitted. "I abandoned my people." No one answered. There was no time. The creature lifted one enormous arm and brought it crashing toward the children carrying the sacred fire. Without hesitation, the chief spurred his horse forward. He rode directly into the creature's path. With all his strength, he threw a burning wagon into its legs. The monster turned toward him instead. "Now," he shouted, "protect the fire." A terrible roar echoed across the valley. The chief never escaped. His sacrifice gave us the chance we needed. The sacred fire reached the ancient shrine at the foot of the mountain. I remembered the carvings inside the ruins. The guardian had never tried to destroy the evil. It had only kept the prison sealed. That was our answer. We did not need to kill the creature. We needed to restore the ancient balance. Holding the sacred flame high above my head, I climbed the cracked stones leading toward the mountain. The creature saw me and charged. Every step shook the earth. Behind me, the villagers stood together instead of running. Their courage weakened the monster with every heartbeat. Just as the creature reached me, I placed the sacred fire into the ancient stone altar. The symbols carved into the mountain suddenly began glowing with golden light. The earth trembled violently. Huge cracks opened beneath the creature. Chains of brilliant light burst from the ground like living roots. They wrapped around its enormous body. The monster roared with all its remaining strength. It struggled. It fought. But the prison was being restored. Slowly, the darkness was pulled back beneath the mountain. The glowing chains tightened until the creature finally disappeared into the earth. The mountain became still. The storm ended. The clouds slowly drifted apart. Warm sunlight spread across the valley for the first time in many days. Birds cautiously returned to the trees. A gentle breeze carried away the smoke. The nightmare was finally over. Not because we had found the strongest warrior, but because we had remembered something even more powerful. When fear divided us, evil grew stronger. When love, courage, and forgiveness united us, even the oldest darkness could not stand against us. And at last, peace returned to our village. The seasons changed. Little by little, the wounds of our village began to heal. At first, it was difficult to imagine life returning to normal. Every burn house reminded us of the terrible night we almost lost everything. Every empty chair around the evening fires reminded us of those who had given their lives so that others could live. But grief did not stop us from rebuilding. Instead, it gave us a reason to keep going. Every morning, men, women, and children worked side by side. No one waited to be asked for help anymore. Those whose homes had survived welcomed families who had lost everything. Young hunters gathered wood from the forest's edge to build new houses. Farmers repaired broken fences together. Women cooked meals large enough for every worker, making sure no one went hungry. The village that had once been divided by fear had become stronger than ever through kindness. Within a few months, new homes stood where ashes had once covered the ground. Children's laughter returned to the dusty paths. The sound was different now. It carried gratitude. The fields slowly came back to life. The brown earth turned green again. Fresh corn reached toward the sun. The cassava plants grew stronger with every passing week. The wells filled with clean water once more, and birds returned to the trees, singing songs we had not heard in a very long time. Nature itself seemed to be healing alongside us. Even so, we never forgot those who had been lost. Near the great baobab tree, we built a simple stone memorial. The names of every brave villager who had sacrificed their life were carefully carved into its surface. Kwame's name stood among them. Whenever I passed the memorial, I remembered his final smile and the trust he had placed in me. His courage would live on far longer than his years. The villagers asked me to become their new chief. I accepted only after making one promise. "I will never lead above you," I told them. "I will walk beside you." A true leader, I had learned, is not the one who gives the loudest orders. A true leader is the one who serves first. Grandmother Abina smiled when she heard my words. Her hair had grown even wider, but her eyes still held the wisdom of generations. During our first harvest festival after the Great Battle, the entire village gathered beneath the baobab tree once again. This time, there were no loud celebrations of victory. Instead, there was quiet gratitude. Grandmother Abina stepped forward and raised her walking stick. "Today," she said softly, "we do not celebrate the monster that was defeated. We honor the guardian we failed to understand." At the foot of the mountain, we placed flowers and carved a wooden statue of the great forest guardian. Every year from that day forward, the villagers returned there together, not to celebrate killing a beast, but to remember the one that had protected us for generations. The children listened closely as the elders shared the true story. They learned never to judge by appearances alone. They learned that warnings should never be ignored simply because they interrupt happiness. Most importantly, they learned that courage is not the absence of fear. It is choosing love over fear, unity over division, hope over despair. As I looked across the village one final time, I saw children playing where ashes had once fallen. I saw neighbors laughing together while repairing fences. I saw families sharing meals beneath the evening sky. Peace had returned. Not because we were perfect, but because we had learned from our mistakes. The greatest dangers are not always the ones we can see. Sometimes they grow inside proud hearts that refuse to listen. Sometimes they appear when people choose blame instead of compassion. But a community that stands together, forgives one another, and learns from its failures can survive even the darkest night. And that became the greatest story our village would ever pass on to the generations yet to come.